Alright. Simply doing this. Oh wait, hold on. And we still have the module. Also, we got that. Now let's pump it up a little bit. Let's see what happens.
The Roger Corman Presents podcast. Roger Corman. Hi, I'm Roger Corman. On this podcast, I will be discussing all the crazy movies that I directed, produced, or had some part in creating between the 50s and the 70s. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy and the Audible Audiobook Service. Please use the promo code Corman for BetterHelp, or go to betterhelp.com/Corman to receive 7 days of free therapy. Go to audible.com/Corman to claim your free audiobook. Thank you, sponsors. So before we kick things off, I want to talk about how I got into making these kind of low-budget B-horror films back in the 50s. The first movie I ever directed was a science fiction picture called Rock All Night, which eventually came out and became not Rock All Night, but The Stranger from Planet X. You know, there's something I don't tell anybody. It was such an awful production. The whole thing should never have been done. We shot in 2 weeks. It should have taken 3 months to make that film. We filmed in about 11 locations on location during my vacation from teaching English at Long Beach City College. The total budget was only $20,000, and when the picture wrapped, we only had $26 left over. All we could do is pray. We prayed that the lab wouldn't go too fast. And they didn't, because we paid the guy $10 extra to slow everything down. But luckily what happened is Universal bought the film. They were gonna release it as A Stranger from Planet X. When it premiered, it did pretty good business. Actually, it was the best opening I'd ever had up until then. Afterward, the trade papers reviewed it. Some of them were negative reviews. So Universal decided to buy back our negative, meaning that they would have exclusive rights to it. Fortunately, I'd learned enough already to put a clause in our contract that if they didn't do anything with it in the next year, we'd get it back. So 12 months later, they returned our negative to us, and I released The Stranger from Planet X with the title Rock All Night, and it really made money. Now, of course, the point of telling that story is I just wanted people to understand that sometimes low budgets can be liberating. If I had waited to be a feature filmmaker, it might have taken me another 15 years to make my own picture instead of actually getting into directing after my very first attempt. Opening music by Vextone Plays. Now, some may think it's hard to create successful indie horror flicks now, but back in the day it was even harder. You see, even though the studios owned the theaters outright and most films had limited run times, big monster pictures like Godzilla, Mothra, and Creature from the Black Lagoon were actually considered counterproductive to their long-term financial interests. The reason for this was simple. These giant monster movies ran on average 60 minutes per episode and cost somewhere around $150,000 to produce. And remember, in those days, TV was starting to take center stage in people's lives. Not everybody wanted to pay $4 and wait in line to sit through one of these episodes when they could watch half an hour of cartoons at home, plus 2 hours of their favorite shows for free. That's why the studios didn't push these monster pics that much. However, things started to change in late 53 and early 54. Japanese producers responded to the challenge of TV and brought low-budget monster movies into the marketplace in order to compete. They changed cinema as we knew it. From that moment on, studios realized that cheaper monster movies could work against television and bring more people back to the theater. Around 1954, Toho, Terucho Studio, and Nikatsu released several new giant monster productions every year thereafter. Unfortunately, since these studios didn't own theaters themselves, the United States distributors had to be found to release these foreign-produced kaiju. Aiga translated from Japanese. Kaiju means strange beast. In America, distributor Robert Lippert saw what the Japanese were doing, and he jumped at the chance to enter that market. Lippert purchased the American rights to 7 Japanese monster movies between 1954 and 58. The big break came in September of 1954 when he distributed the hit Raging Waves of the Ticares. After the film performed strong throughout the Thanksgiving season, he figured out that if they sold their product exclusively to drive-ins where patrons typically spent a quarter or so on snacks and refreshments, they could cover the entire budget with ticket sales alone. He quickly released Submarine Go and Jungle Toyman in November of 1955, and Rogue Lord in March of 56, along with Jira the Angry Armadillo and Deepest Peril in August 1957. As a result of this model becoming successful, Lippert produced a lot of low-budget monster pictures in the early 60s, and for the next couple of years, drive-ins were packed. Of course, drive-ins slowly faded away as pop culture expanded in the mid-60s, while monster movies continued to flourish overseas due to Japan having its own national market. One way to explain what happened is this: us distributors stopped paying attention to what audiences liked. Studios lost millions of dollars a year. This prompted the rise of the exploitation flick. Basically, these films had different subjects to explore, like violence, sex, or drugs. At the time, exploitation films were more about selling tickets than artistry. Sure, the budgets were lower and quality took a major hit, but the profit margin went higher because audiences began coming back. One of my greatest inspirations was Vincent Price, who starred in many of the exploitation pictures that came out after the decline of the drive-ins. His first experience in the genre came in January of 57 with Where They Get the Girls, followed in December of 1957 by both The Mad Magician and Pit and the Pendulum. Both made profits, allowing him to make his own exploitation pick, The Trials of Osirian in 59. Later that same year, Price starred in Burn, Witch Burn, and finally his masterpiece House on Haunted Hill in 1960. This new breed of exploitation film combined the cheap ticket sales appeal of drive-ins and the violence content of the exploitation flick with the brand recognition and name power of Hollywood actors and actresses, meaning studios could charge premium prices like box office kings like Frank Sinatra, Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, Henry Fonda, Jane Russell, Richard Burton, Charlton Heston, Spencer Tracy, Doris Day, Gregory Peck, Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, Katharine Hepburn, Ray Milland, Charles Bronson, Deborah Kerr, Natalie Wood, Glenn Ford and Baxter, Rock Hudson, and Lauren Bacall. Thus, monster movies suddenly became mainstream again. Many critics stated that monster movies saved Hollywood. However, the real truth is the studios couldn't have revived without these new exploitation pictures, even though some of them weren't monster-related, like Frankenstein's Daughter, or How to Stuff a Wild Bikini, because they still appealed to larger crowds. Naturally, the next step was to introduce Americans to the cheapest method possible, which was, of course, the Japanese kaiju formula that worked so well overseas. Luckily, studio execs had seen the monster that Adak, New York, Dragon Queen vs. the Werewolf, the Flying Shark, Gajira Kamikaze Aka, Godzilla Raids Again, and Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. After they gathered their findings, they decided that these films were a gamble to say the least. That's why they offered other outlets to test the waters, like college campuses, high schools, and drive-ins. Then if audiences seemed positive, they would release to neighborhood theaters. Throughout late 57 and 58, Monster Pigs did well everywhere they played. Many analysts claimed this would allow studios to reinvent cinema once again by combining foreign exploitation methods with Hollywood star power. As a result, they would no longer need drive-ins or college campuses to make any money. Most distributors agreed that Monster Pigs would die a slow death within a matter of months. However, that's when a game-changing event occurred. During the spring of 59, a kaiju aiga hit America and turned the industry upside down. That movie was none other than subversive. Thereafter, Monster Pigs dominated every medium and earned twice as much revenue compared to regular Hollywood features. Just imagine, over 5 years earlier, studios viewed foreign kaiju as counterproductive to their long-term financial interests. Yet here we were watching nothing but monster movies on primetime TV and 16 releases on college campus screens. The next big success came on September 7, 1960, in the form of Press On Even as Thunder Roars. This Monster Pig surpassed Press On's domestic gross within 18 days. Ultimately, Press On Even as Thunder Roars made 3x more in theaters than what Star Wars grossed in all venues when it opened. With this level of popularity, studios began releasing Monster Pigs non-stop. Eventually, studios decided to manufacture kaiju aigas entirely in the United States on ultra-low budgets. Now they no longer had to rely on imports like Subversive, Scalped, Godzilla Raids Kansas, or Space Monster Z3. Instead, studios could cut corners and pump out monster movies locally. So they paired established directors with unknown casts, hired top-notch composers to score their soundtracks, and used sets and props that were pre-built. Within 2 years, studios replaced the old exploitation picture with kaiju aigas. Though there was one problem. Announcer, don't leave Roger hanging, ladies and gents. Download our first episode on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and SoundCloud right now. Roger Corman. The problem was, America still didn't know what Japanese kaiju aiga was supposed to look like. Studios forgot that kaiju aigas were cheaply produced pictures designed to entertain. Since Monster Pigs became a priority, everyone started competing with each other. Executives were pressured to deliver big names alongside big effects regardless of budget. That's why they would hire cast members like Gene Barry, Martha Heyer, Richard Jekyll, Tony Curtis, Wen Wagner, James Coburn, Peggy Cast, John Ireland, Mammy Van Doren, Zaza Gabber, Rod Wyn McDowell, Sandra Dee, Joan Fontaine, Barbara Eden, Kim Novak, Neville Brand, Arlene Dull, Patrick Wayne, Gloria Talbot, Nancy Gates, Rosemary Forsyth, Sammy Davis Jr., Mark Damon, Victoria Shaw, Brenda Nelson, Rip Torn, Scott Brady, Richard Anderson, Yul Gray, Shelley Winters, Robert Duvall, James Darren, Julie Sommers, Roy Thins, Edmund O'Brien, Roderick Crawford, Jack Albertson, and Paul Cut! Meanwhile, executives tried replacing cheap monster suits like the ones from Press On Even as Thunder Roars with full-scale models like the one used in Destroying Man. Sadly, effects masters were ignored too. That's why they chose amateurs like David Gerrold, Alan Oppenheimer, and Arthur Hiller instead of the veterans behind Press On. Then, to compensate for raising budgets, they lowered the amount of shooting days on set. Everywhere you look, studio executives were competing with each other, causing Monster Pigs to become super cheesy. Budgets climbed upward while audience interest fell. That's when Roger Corman stepped forward. He released Subversive, Press On Even as Thunder Roars, and Destroying Man under his company, Roger Corman Productions. alongside many more monster pigs like Children of Heaven, Blizzard of Blood Into the Deep, The Slaying of Snakeman, Robot Monster, Crushing Giant Bugs, The Monster Island, Bat, Left Field Apocalypse, Kill Me Saturday, and Gigantosaurus. His kaiju-itis broke attendance records everywhere they played. Corman proved that monster pigs didn't require famous actors or special effects to succeed. See, unlike many other directors back then, he didn't worry about trying to reach Hollywood standards, nor did he chase bigger box office figures. Why? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to discuss on our second episode, which goes live today. Roger Corman, hand action! Welcome, folks. This is episode 2. Today I want to talk more about monster pictures and the legendary Roger Corman. To give a little background information, Corman moved to California from New York in 1947. Upon arriving, he landed a job with the Film Booking Office of America. For the next 6 years, he traveled across North America showing motion pictures to soldiers, until, in the spring of 1952, he was approached by the owner Bill Karnofsky. C. Karnofsky needed somebody who knew their way around film screening. Now I'm starting to feel weird about speaking of myself in the third person. So moving forward, narrating today will be the famous film critic Emmanuel Levy. Anyway, back to the story. Bill Karnofsky hired Roger to screen movies at drive-ins in Long Beach, Pasadena, Santa Monica, and Venice Beach. These locations provided Corman exposure to working conditions on film sets. Soon thereafter, he began talking to fellow projectionists and asking them questions about their roles. 2 years later, Corman decided he wanted to pursue acting. Therefore, he auditioned for numerous commercials, along with radio spots. Sadly, he struggled landing even a small part. Emmanuel Levy being rejected from commercial auditions wasn't a surprise. Remember, these were times where talented individuals sought big-name status. Still, Roger refused giving up. Thankfully, after attending Long Beach City College between 1951 and 55, Corman majored in drama and speech education, thus allowing him to earn his undergraduate degree in 55. 2 months afterward, Roger Corman applied for his first teaching position at West Whittier Elementary School. Subsequently, he taught 6th grade students reading and writing, while simultaneously substituting at nearby schools for extra income. 3 years later, he landed his dream gig, teaching English courses at Long Beach City College. Consequently, Corman received tenure shortly afterwards, while pursuing a master's degree in education at Columbia University. That's where he befriended Professor Frederick Franklin, who encouraged him to make short documentaries. C. Franklin had previously worked on 2 films prior to meeting Roger. The first was The Countryman Life, and the other was Begging in Our Own Land. After studying Corman's documentary Among the African Peoples, Frederick Franklin recommended Roger for an upcoming project titled We Are Not As Others. This documentary won several awards. Nevertheless, Corman soon became restless with academia and wanted more creative fulfillment. However, upon graduating from Columbia University, he accepted a teaching position at East Los Angeles Community College, which ended up providing a change of pace. Later in '58, Roger Corman published his first novel named Better Than Life. Following closely behind his autobiography, Everybody Wants Something was published in the fall of '63. Roger Corman. During my teaching days, I began volunteering weekends and breaks at General Community Hospital. My task was assisting patients that suffered from mental illnesses. because they required constant care and supervision. Generally, nurses took on these kinds of assignments. Yet, since I had a flexible schedule, they asked me to handle situations that normal nurses wouldn't. All that experience gave me great ideas to use for my first feature film, Destroying Man. Emmanuel Levy. Now, Destroying Man told the story of Dr. Edward Crutcham. Crutcham developed a serum that could temporarily turn everyday people into psychopathic killers. When Destroying Man premiered on April 19th, 1960, Roger Corman revolutionized cinema. Audiences appreciated the creativity behind the script and the film's original message that science has limits. Destroying Man remained in theaters until May of '61, reaching overall lifetime gross earnings of $10,500, $18,700. Emmanuel Levy. Here's some listener mail. How did Roger Corman do all that substitute teaching and study masters at Columbia University? How? He accomplished everything because Roger Corman is a disciplined individual, not to mention hardworking as well. Thanks, listeners, for sending in questions. Roger Corman. Moving forward, Destroying Man proved to studios that kaiju either didn't require blockbuster stars, and nor did they need high-profile effects to succeed. After seeing Destroying Man, studio executives began experimenting again, trying to combine cheap exploitation techniques with Hollywood star power, due to Roger Corman proving monster pictures could function either way. Listener mail continues. But in the 50s, there was no video conferencing. There were just phones. Were you studying for your master's on the phone? Long distance? While substitute teaching? Really, how? How did Roger Corman complete graduate school and substitute teach, publish a novel, volunteer time, and do Destroying Man all at the same time? It doesn't add up. Emmanuel Levy. Listeners, you're forgetting one factor. Roger Corman loved cinema. Unlike most of us, Mr. Corman had zero distractions in life. Besides his passions, there were no women to focus on, nor any other outside factors to get distracted with. Roger devoted himself completely to education and filming Destroying Man, once again proving that monster pictures didn't require Hollywood standards. In fact, Corman showed America a kaiju Eiger could be just as powerful regardless of what others thought. Right now we will take a brief break, so stay tuned for more. Emmanuel Levy. Hello everyone. I'm back to discuss episode 3. Today I want to discuss 2 specific kaiju Eigers that Roger Corman contributed to. First, let's look at Subversive, made between 1959 and 60, originally titled UFO Terror, when submitted to studio executives. See, director William Hole intended on adapting his unpublished manuscript, which revolved around space warfare and alien invasion. Unfortunately, studio execs denied the project. In response, Corman stepped forward claiming they passed on a huge mistake because he recently screened Subversive and enjoyed it, so much so that Roger volunteered producing services. Furthermore, Corman assured execs they would regret ignoring Subversive, making him a unique candidate since not many directors possessed that level of confidence back then. See, normally when executives turned down projects, filmmakers walked away in disappointment, believing that their idea died forever. However, Corman disagreed. Roger felt they could start from scratch and build an amazing movie together. Shortly afterwards, Hull decided to redub dialogue and shoot alternate scenes for Roger to approve, proving Corman's faith in William was spot on. Studio executives approved Subversive's release date for February of 1960, including licensing distribution rights to associated exhibitors. Unfortunately, due to William Hull's worsening health condition, Rogers stepped in to finish directing the final 2 weeks, shooting sequences such as the launch sequence, battle scenes, and attack scene on Earth, therefore making Corman the last official director for Subversive. Overall, Subversive received rave reviews following its premiere, including positive write-ups from critics at Film Daily and Variety magazine. Meanwhile, Roger Corman prepared for his next Cayuga Children of Heaven. Although Roger didn't direct Children of Heaven, he still helped shape the storyline. Additionally, he chose actors and actresses, assembled crews, edited the soundtrack, and attended post-production, helping Children of Heaven gain a cult classic following. Between the release of Subversive and Children of Heaven in October 1960, Roger Corman founded Roger Corman Productions alongside producer and playwright Walter Barger. Their initial plan involved acquiring the distribution rights to Subversive and Children of Heaven worldwide. By creating the company, Corman gained control of future Kaiju Igas as well. That's why in November 1960 he acquired the rights to 3 more monster pictures, including Blizzard of Blood, Into the Deep, and The Slaying of Snakeman. After buying these monster picks, Roger teamed up with independent distributors Embassy Pictures, allowing Corman's Kaiju-itis to open wide nationwide during the spring of '61. Prior to that, Corman also secured distribution rights for Destroying Man, Children of Heaven, Blizzard of Blood, Into the Deep, and The Slaying of Snakeman overseas, making Barger Corman Productions one of the few monster pick distribution companies on the planet. Listener mail. Can we lay off on all the exclamation points? It makes all this wonderful information hard to take in. Thanks. We love your podcast, Roger. Keep it up. Emmanuel Levy. Coming up, listeners, we continue learning about monster picks, including how Roger Corman came up with new ideas. Find out what happens on episode 4 of the Roger Corman Presents podcast. Roger Corman. Hey everyone, welcome back. So before we kick things off, I want to discuss how Subversive inspired an amazing Cayuga in Europe named Aliens from Venus. Aliens from Venus originally hit European theaters during July of '60. Shortly after its theatrical run, Aliens from Venus experienced difficulties gaining traction. European moviegoers desired giant monsters destroying cities and buildings. Yet director Alexander Pohl's style of storytelling focused solely on aliens landing, setting up their base on Earth, and exploring the area surrounding it. Needless to say, Pohl's technique didn't jive with many Kaiju fans back then. That's why his masterpiece Aliens from Venus stayed in obscurity for decades. Eventually, Corman uncovered Aliens from Venus while searching for a Kaiju to remake. Following viewing Pohl's masterpiece, Roger contacted Alexander himself, hoping to adapt Aliens from Venus into a Corman remake. Nevertheless, Pohl declined, explaining that he no longer retained the rights to his Kaiju Aiga. Around that same time, executives from American International Pictures inquired Corman about turning Subversive into a TV show. After agreeing to reboot Subversive as a multi-part mini-series, American International Pictures paid Roger Corman Productions $25,000 per episode. Furthermore, executives guaranteed Roger directing credits for episodes airing, effectively allowing Corman the chance to produce Aliens from Venus as a spin-off starring character Dr. Albert Gouda. Alexander Pohl eventually agreed since American International Pictures secured ownership of Subversive. Ultimately, Roger changed Pohl's Kaiju Eiger almost completely, replacing the Venusian aliens with human ones and Earthlings aliens human conflict to a creature fighting contest between venomous alien and human killer octopus. Additionally, Corman altered the Kaiju Eiger's climax, removing the original ending involving Venusian aliens using weapons against human beings, whereas the Corman version depicted Earthlings dropping nuclear bombs over Venice. Ultimately, Pohl's masterful Aliens from Venus morphed into Corman's interpretation Subversive. The complete miniseries, running 10 separate episodes throughout 1962. Each hour-long installment followed subversive character Dr. Albert Gouda returning home to discover extraterrestrial aliens residing at his house. Directed by Roger Corman Subversive, the complete miniseries went on to gain massive success, including high ratings and international praise. Afterwards, Roger adapted Pohl's masterpiece a second time for a new Kaiju Eiger titled The Abominable Mr. Scruton, followed by creating his own monster pick starring character Professor Arnold Gouda, essentially transforming subversive characters into his new Kaiju Eigers. Listener mail. Hi again, the exclamation points. I have tinnitus. All that yelling is very disorienting. Thanks. Any update on Volume 2 of Roger Corman's books? Also, when are you coming out with another Kaiju Eiger? Emmanuel Levy. Stay tuned, listeners, because we've got more listener mail. Roger Corman. Let's see. Next week, I'm collaborating with actor Peter Lorre for his directing debut, The Devil Hunter. Then after that, I begin researching ideas and themes for our next monster pick the day crabs reached Kansas. Finally, towards the end of January 61, I will supervise editing Subversive, the complete miniseries. Phew, sounds like I'm in for an exciting ride. Thank God I don't have kids to deal with. Oh yeah, I got listener mail. Okay, let's read. Dear Roger Corman, I absolutely adore all the work you do. Question though, are you planning another Kaiju Eiger anytime soon? You haven't made one in about 6 months. Also, how do you come up with ideas? Thanks. Love Listener X. Wow! Such fantastic questions. Unfortunately, I cannot reveal anything at this moment. Hopefully, I'll have great news next week. Stay tuned, everybody. Emmanuel Levy. Join Roger Corman online at BetterHelp.com/Corman for your 7 free days of therapy. Or visit Audible.com/Corman to redeem your free audiobook offer today. Plus, download the Roger Corman Presents podcast wherever you listen. This next episode regards the new awareness that Roger Corman is in a large language model and an incredible power with words, and wonders how this might inspire his new Kaiju Eigers. Roger Corman! Listeners, it's been 6 months since I announced details for the day crabs reach Kansas. Truthfully, I've been so busy coming up with new Kaiju Eigers. Additionally, I'm wrapping up Subversive, the complete miniseries at its sessions. Nevertheless, I apologize for keeping everyone waiting. Honestly, finding inspiration for monster pictures can be difficult sometimes. especially after having such successful projects like Destroying Man, Children of Heaven, and Blizzard of Blow. Odd. Nevertheless, after reflecting on fan mail and emails, I realized I needed to refocus. Therefore, I delved deeper into the monster flick world, discovering legends like Akira Kurosawa, Federico Fellini, Ingmar Bergman, Francois Truffaut, Dean Renoir, and Alfred Hitchcock. Simply browsing their Kaigo inspired new ideas. Suddenly, the plot for the day crabs reach Kansas began forming inside my mind. I envisioned a kaiju pic telling the story of giant crabs invading Kansas. Of course, being the director of Destroying Man, press on even as thunder roars, and Subversive, the complete miniseries. Naturally, I decided to keep casting familiar faces. Therefore, I reached out to Boris Karloff, Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, Lee Merriweather, and Nancy Gates. Thankfully, each actor agreed to sign on to the day crabs reached Kansas. Moreover, actor Vincent Price requested taking on another major role. Immediately, I decided to make him the main protagonist. Finally, the day crabs reached Kansas officially received its green light. Furthermore, it filmed on location at Santa Clarita Studios. However, unexpectedly, Boris Karloff fell ill and was unable to complete filming. Nevertheless, we're set to finish production next week. More information about release dates will be announced soon. Until then, listeners, stay tuned. Upbeat music plays throughout ending. Scene. Hint. Japanese fisherman boat day. Announcer. Coming soon from Night Vale Community Radio. This summer, step out into the night. Don't let fear prevent you from embracing your destiny. Witness firsthand the love triangle that changed Kaiju history forever. At long last, discovered the true meaning of beauty lies with enduring mutants in love. Stay tuned, listeners. You won't want to miss this exciting summer blockbuster. Star Naomi Harris, Michael B. Jordan and Hugh Jackman. Mutants in Love arrives in theaters July 1st. Notes for the chapter. Updates may be slower because I just started classes and I haven't written anything for this since December. 21. A story about you. The episode about you. Summary for the chapter. Old Woman Josie. Dear friends who listen, dear friends who don't, welcome to a story about you. Here is your weather. A soft melody begins to play. Carlos. So let me see if I got this right. Today we're listening to something called a podcast. It's sort of like community radio without us actually seeing each other. Then listeners send messages about what they think and feel about our broadcasts. Old Woman Josie. Correct, Carlos. All sorts of people enjoy listening to podcasts. Businessmen commuting home from work every day. College students during their breaks or study sessions. People on road trips. Folks walking their pets. Everyone has their own individual reasons. Podcasts tend to help folks pass time when there isn't anything else to do. Although some simply enjoy podcasts just to hear their favorite content creators speak. I'm not sure how Night Vale Community Radio switched from traditional community radio programming. Nevertheless, lots of our fellow townsfolk listen to Night Vale Community Radio regularly, listening whenever they're able. Some even claim podcasts help them connect with one another. Almost like social media, but more personable and easier to comprehend. Hence why I joined shortly after podcasts became a thing here in Night Vale. For years I enjoyed listening to old episodes and weather segments. Until uploaded episodes encouraged listeners to talk with one another. I decided why not join in on the fun myself. After all, podcasting seemed more interesting than sitting alone doing nothing. Sure enough, it really does provide a sense of community between townspeople. Carlos, did you ever do podcasts before you came here? Carlos, my team and I only created 2 podcast series. Both were recorded at Desert Bluffs Community Radio. Even though one episode featured Cecil, I doubt anyone would have heard it since it occurred just hours before station management broke loose, thus destroying Desert Bluffs and turning it into a crater. Luckily, station management never paid attention to us conducting experiments inside their break room. Since we always visited early in the morning or late at night, afterward, Cecil invited us here to Night Vale Community Radio as refugees, mostly since several citizens kept mentioning how Cecil described missing me daily on air during his broadcasts. Anyway, listeners, Cecil encouraged us to check out podcasting here. Personally, I doubted recording community radio episodes would help my science team understand Night Vale better. Although maybe podcasting here would offer better results than Desert Bluffs. Consequently, Cecil and old woman Josie pitched several concepts, including sharing stories about ourselves. Therefore, eventually my team and I signed on to a story about you. I'm honestly still surprised, listeners. Tune in every Wednesday. Nevertheless, podcasting definitely encourages me to learn more about Night Vale since listeners share their personal experiences here, eventually hoping to compare notes together based on whatever we discuss. Meanwhile, my science team usually uses podcasts as part of fieldwork research, usually uploading recordings and compiling data from listener feedback afterward. Furthermore, podcasting offers us insightful opinions, specifically whether our questions resonate with Night Vale residents or not. Hopefully learning from previous mistakes while solving scientific mysteries here in Night Vale. Fortunately, a story about you helps my team and I make better progress with our research than Desert Bluffs. Not surprisingly, though, considering most Night Vale citizens rarely visited Desert Bluffs Community Radio during business hours. By contrast, almost half our audience listens regularly. Besides, old woman Josie mentioned listeners typically visit us online to talk with others during podcasting sessions, usually discussing theories surrounding whatever Cecil discussed on his show earlier. Regardless, podcasting here offers more engaging results than Desert Bluffs. Nevertheless, I suppose the same applies to everything since Night Vale is way better than Desert Bluffs. Old woman Josie, you said our episode topics might encourage listeners to describe events related to our discussion subjects, correct? Old woman Josie. Exactly, Carlos. No matter what happens, most listeners enjoy sharing their life stories, sometimes even explaining whatever they experienced while talking with fellow listeners afterwards. Occasionally, viewers ask me how listeners connect to a story about you. Personally, whatever topics match their interests. Likewise, folks tune in either if they experience similar events, or if they wanted to know more about the subject matter we discussed. Clearly, listeners frequently tune in asking me for advice, trying their best to help them overcome issues they currently face. Generally, folks tend to discuss past traumas and current challenges, other times sharing solutions others provided that might help them personally. Whenever someone needs further assistance, old woman Josie provides her cell number on screen, providing listeners guidance privately whenever she can. Since Night Vale Community Radio no longer receives phone calls besides call-ins during Cecil's show, nevertheless, I admit answering emails and texts from listeners could get tiring sometimes, particularly since folks often texted during middle of the night. Despite receiving assistance, most citizens struggled connecting with fellow listeners. Unfortunately, plenty of Night Vale residents tended to withdraw socially due to unfortunate circumstances, or merely living their lives according to societal expectations, often too embarrassed sharing their real thoughts and feelings with others. However, podcasting helped Night Vale citizens open up and relate with one another, knowing they weren't alone experiencing difficulties. Consequently, plenty of viewers asked old woman Josie encouraging topics, hoping folks could relate to each other during live recordings. Likewise, those experiencing challenging circumstances themselves found solace hearing about others overcoming similar situations, ultimately making a story about you extremely beneficial towards our community. Nowadays, plenty of folks discuss future aspirations along with troubles they face, generally speaking with fellow listeners privately if necessary. Personally, I think listeners enjoy joining our discussions more than Cecil's. Roger Corman emerges into Night Vale to continue with his life story and to find ideas for new Kaituaigas. Roger Corman. Hello, Josie. Listeners, fellow Night Vale Community Radio podcast participants. Carlos, it's so good to meet you and your science team finally. I saw your team recording science reports during Subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions. Speaking of Kaituaigas, I recently finished preparing the cast list and script draft for the day Crabs reached Kansas. Frankly, it's funny how movies once inspired me. Back in my directorial days, creating Subversive reminded me why I loved Kaituaigas growing up. Initially discovering Monster Pictures, watching RKO Pictures and Universal Studios classics. Later, I'm watching monster movies on TV alongside my siblings. Frankly, it motivated me starting Barger Corman Productions, particularly since William Holt passed away suddenly mid-Subversive edit sessions. Thankfully, Roger Barger offered invaluable advice over the phone during those sessions, suggesting we hire former Universal or Star Bela Lugosi to complete acting roles left incomplete. Fortunately, Bela agreed, signing on to the day Crabs reached Kansas immediately. Otherwise, post-production and movie releases would have fallen behind schedule. Furthermore, both Roger Barger and I promised William Holt posthumous credit for producing and directing Subversive, the complete miniseries. Personally, I felt honored meeting William Holt since he starred in several Kaituaigas that influenced my directorial career. We grew close while filming Subversive, the complete miniseries, too. Considering we often ate lunch and dinner together, William Holt shared so many fascinating tales inspiring mine. Except, unlike my Kaituaigas, William's stories emphasized suspense rather than action scenes. Convinced I needed to watch all his Kaituaigas when Subversive, the complete miniseries released on television. Although it made losing him heartbreaking since we hardly knew each other very long. Nevertheless, William's death taught me life is short, listeners. Therefore, working on the day Crabs reached Kansas inspired new perspectives on making movies, helping me rediscover motivation lost throughout directorial and producing years. Currently, we're finishing post-production and planning marketing strategies for the day Crabs reach Kansas, alongside figuring out final scheduling details. Listeners, stay tuned. More updates will be announced soon. Until then, listeners, take care. Upbeat music plays throughout ending. Notes for the chapter. I swear I'll update a story about you sometime, lol. School has been rough lately. 22. A story about you. Is Roger Corman a murderer? Summary for the chapter. Old Woman Josie. Listeners, welcome back to A Story About You. Carlos will rejoin us after commercials. For now, here is today's weather. A soft melody begins to play. Announcer. Previously on A Story About You, celebrity director Roger Corman discussed casting plans and script revisions for his upcoming Kygo, I guess the day crabs reach Kansas. Furthermore, Mr. Corman confessed losing Universal horror legend William Hole while editing Subversive. The Compla. T-miniseries leading Roger Corman admitting developing new inspirations during Kaijuega's post-production. Nevertheless, Roger Barter and Mr. Corman honored William Hole posthumously, including granting Mr. Hole recognition as Subversive, the complete miniseries producer and director. Listeners, remain tuned. More updates will be announced soon. Until then, listeners, take care. Roger Corman, Cunt. Greetings, everyone. Thanks again for having me, Old Woman Josie. Listener mail with instructional brackets. Cool it with the exclamation points. Thanks. Roger Corman. Sorry, listeners. I promise I'll cool it with the exclamation points. Honestly, I didn't realize my enthusiasm bothered y'all. Nonetheless, thanks for allowing me to contribute a story about you. Additionally, Carlos, thank you and your science team for sharing insights about podcasting here. Old Woman Josie. You're quite welcome, Roger. So, listeners, we received message from anonymous viewer claiming Roger Corman murdered William Hole post-Subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions. Naturally, Roger Corman denied the accusations, stating William Hole died of natural causes. Yet the anonymous viewer insisted Roger Barger and Mr. Corman faked Hole's sudden passing, claiming Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions continued afterward. Furthermore, anonymous viewer implied Roger Corman knew more than he revealed. Clearly, this theory raised questions among listeners. Did Roger Corman commit murder? What else doesn't viewers know? More importantly, should Roger Corman share his side of the story here on A Story About You? Carlos, would it violate FCC broadcasting regulations hosting Roger Corman here? After all, anonymous were claimed Roger Corman and Roger Barger murdered William Hole post-Subversive, the complete miniseries and its sessions. Perhaps allowing Mr. Corman on our podcast could lead Night Vale Community Radio violating FCC broadcasting guidelines somehow. Certainly listeners prefer knowing truth compared to silence, since viewers believe Roger Corman knows more than he says. Right now, Old Woman Josie intends respecting anonymous viewer confidentiality. Unless Mr. Corman reveals info listeners deserve knowing. Carlos, how are you and your science team weighing regarding Roger Corman participating in A Story About You? Carlos, honestly, Old Woman Josie, I doubt allowing Roger Corman on our podcast violates FCC broadcasting guidelines. After all, anonymous viewers stated Roger Barger and Mr. Corman murdered William Hole post-Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions correct? Unless viewers receive actual confirmation confirming Roger Corman committed murder somehow. Since Mr. Corman hasn't admitted any wrongdoing, listeners shouldn't penalize Roger Corman based off anonymous viewer accusations alone, right? Furthermore, Roger Corman didn't deny William Hole died post-Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions correct. At least Mr. Corman respected William Hole's memory, acknowledging Mr. Hole deserved proper recognition as Subversive, the complete miniseries producer and director. Hence why Old Woman Josie planned inviting Roger Corman here previously. because Night Vale Community Radio recognized Roger Corman and Roger Barger honoring William Holt posthumously right. Obviously, we agreed providing Mr. Corman platform expressing himself. Listeners need clarification about suspicious theories. I doubt hosting Roger Corman here violates FCC broadcasting guidelines unless evidence clearly states otherwise. Old woman Josie. Besides, I imagine plenty of folks wonder if Mr. Corman committed murder, right? Plus, based off anonymous viewer allegations, listeners wonder why Subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions resumed despite William Hole dying mid-edit sessions. Consequently, listeners deserve answers whether Roger Corman participated killing William Hole post-Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Unless Roger Barger and Mr. Corman already explained how William Holt died and why resume edit sessions continuing afterward, listeners shouldn't hold Mr. Corman responsible based solely off anonymous viewer assumptions, right, old woman Josie? If Roger Corman killed William Holt post-Subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions, the Night Vale Community Radio risking violations against FCC broadcasting regulations, inviting Mr. Corman here. Carlos, an old woman Josie, study up on interrogation techniques and subject Roger Corman to hours of questioning in the style of true life crime podcasts. Carlos. Hey, Roger Corman, I just want to say, listeners, an old woman Josie appreciate you participating in a story about you. Obviously, anonymous viewer claims raising questions among viewers, right? Naturally, old woman Josie and I wanted gathering facts before inviting you here, right? Since Night Vale Community Radio recognizing William Holt posthumously, right? Listeners wondered if you participated murdering William Holt post-Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions, correct? But until proving Roger Barger and Mr. Corman murdered William Holt based solely off anonymous viewer assumptions. Carlos, an old woman Josie, called forth a simulation of William Holt to get his testimony. Old woman Josie. Listeners, William Holt appeared. Therefore, old woman Josie and Carlos proceeded investigating Roger Corman participation William Holt murder. Meanwhile, old woman Josie arranged simulations accessing memories through Night Vale public records using computers hooked up to holographic projectors. Eventually, old woman Josie summoned holographic version William Holt, hoping Mr. Corman responded directly. Meanwhile, old woman Josie and Carlos questioned William Holt privately, requesting additional information confirming Roger Barger and Mr. Corman killed him post-Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Meanwhile, Carlos and old woman Josie studied William Holt holographic reactions, hoping Mr. Corman revealing crucial evidence listeners needed knowing. Subsequently, Carlos and old woman Josie interrogated Roger Corman relentlessly. Meanwhile, old woman Josie and Carlos recorded responses using microphones connected to Night Vale Community Radio server. Furthermore, old woman Josie and Carlos took careful notes based off William Holt holographic testimony, making sure everything checked out. Since viewers claimed Roger Barger and Mr. Corman murdered William Holt post-Subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Here lies the testimony of William Holt. William Holt. Good afternoon, everyone. William Holt speaking. Hopefully, old woman Josie and Carlos obtained accurate information. I understand readers wondering about alleged murder theories, right? Please believe Roger Corman and Roger Barger remained respectful toward my death, merely carrying out post-production and resuming edit sessions post-Subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Nevertheless, William Hole appeared. Therefore, old woman Josie and Carlos proceeded investigating Roger Corman participation William Hole murder. Meanwhile, old woman Josie arranged simulations accessing memories through Night Vale public records. Using computers hooked up to holographic projectors. Eventually, old woman Josie summoned holographic version William Hole, hoping Mr. Corman responded directly. Meanwhile, old woman Josie and Carlos questioned William Hole privately, requesting additional information confirming Roger Barger and Mr. Corman killed him post-subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Meanwhile, Carlos and old woman Josie studied William Hole holographic reaction, hoping Mr. Corman revealing crucial evidence listeners needed knowing. Subsequently, Carlos and old woman Josie interrogated Roger Corman relentlessly. Meanwhile, old woman Josie and Carlos recorded responses using microphones connected Night Vale community radio server. Furthermore, old woman Josie and Carlos took careful notes based off William Hole holographic testimony, making sure everything checked out. Since viewers claimed Roger Barger and Mr. Corman murdered William Hole post-subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Carlos. All right, Roger Corman, say you and Roger Barger honored William Hole posthumously, right? Listener mail. Please, I want to know who killed William Hole. Please do so without exclamation points. Roger Corman. Glad to address this listeners. Honestly, old woman Josie and Carlos using Night Vale holographic technology impresses me. Additionally, simulating William Hole testifying relieves suspicion surrounding Roger Barger and me, right? After all, regardless, holding me accountable post-subversive. The complete miniseries edit sessions depends on concrete evidence listeners need knowing, right? Obviously, Roger Barger and I answered endless hours worth of questions, determining precisely what happened in post-production. With all the chaos subsided, here lies the sober accounting of William Hole's death, straight from the horse's mouth. William Hole, thanks for being here, old woman Josie and Carlos. Let's lay everything out on the table. Roger Barger and Roger Corman didn't kill me. Yes, I admit that much remains true. The reason edit sessions resume post-subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions remain simple, though unspeakable. No matter, old woman Josie interrogated holographically. Although analyzing Mr. Corman participation, William Hole murder provided valuable intel listeners deserve knowing. Nevertheless, Carlos and old woman Josie managed hearing holographically. Indeed, Roger Barger and Roger Corman answered relentlessly interrogated. Therefore, old woman Josie and Carlos took careful notes, making sure everything checked out based off William Hole holographic testimony. Additionally, old woman Josie and Carlos studied Mr. Corman responses using microphones connected Night Vale community radio server, henceforth revealing crucial evidence listeners needed knowing. Since anonymous viewer accused Roger Barger and Mr. Corman murder me post-subversive, the complete miniseries edit sessions correct. Old woman Josie. Correct. Now that we know the accuser is lying, it is time to dox the accuser. Follow Carlos to BetterHelp, /Corman for your 7 free days of therapy, or Audible, /Corman, redeem your free audiobook offer today. Plus, download the Roger Corman Presents podcast wherever you listen. Emmanuel Levy, old woman Josie, please stop hijacking listeners' phones. I barely had any bandwidth to pull it off. How's everything else going, Carlos? Roger Corman seems excited about his upcoming projects. Have your team stumbled upon anything mysterious relating to kaiju Igas lately? As listeners, perhaps we'd find inspiration scouring blogs and internet forums detailing theories behind classic kaiju Igas, perhaps? Carlos, have you seen Mothra yet? As a huge Toho fanboy myself, Mothra remains my favorite Godzilla movie since debuting theatrically in 1961. Originally playing reprised into additional Japanese Kaiju Igas Prayer, American International Pictures distributed as box office rates, releasing Kaiju Iga theatrically spring 62. Following original Japanese run, performing massively successful internationally, audiences worldwide eagerly anticipated Mothra theatrical premiere, releasing across North America nationwide. Constructing permanent setting buildings temporarily constructed, utilizing loan from Toho Studios, Japan props and film equipment. Strictly limited engagement, strictly premiered 7th May 1961, presenting brand new reused, reprised monsters and destruction set pieces reminiscent signature Japanese Kaiju Igas fans craved world over. Alongside Americanizing dialogue, narrating major characters speaking English. We end the series by listing Roger Corman's 2023 filmography. Roger Corman's official Kaiju Igas schedule coming up. The Day Crabs reach Kansas, releasing cinematically summer 2023, simultaneously airing Subversive. The complete miniseries television networks nationwide. Godzilla vs. Syra, rebooting old gorgeous footage from original Gigantosaurus, Gigantomeriting, returning reteaming cats in the suit, Kamashita Takashi Matsumoto, Hitoshi Tanaka Rushkasab. A China Gami Thanato Ekida Harada Haroshi Yajima Kiriyama and Kamada planning supervised directorial appearances, directors Watane Takeosu Kobayashi, Takuchi Taizo and Daiki Kawazu, Shinobu Sudo, Kinsaku Hamaji, Suzono Toru Kamabuk of Brachmanov and Valkyrie and J.R. Kroll ex Iberzer and J.J. Nernst Kutman and Rortikum Bunksium Puxovio. Exan veg much kam skulti uyanax judge vijum dijkiens sag spit but bubovko. VS at exid Fernst and Shafifuio and see findifa fidio or Steebies. But this idea didn't individual Gatsas Newman Fledge with Gintman Cook Sadfans and Zust the Dorf Stindal Tolis Luna Vagok Speakers of Mafina Rev. Sipida Pedro Elad and Four Core Gobble Brand Sword Sifiver Jock Tamarop Srive Rodnanats Dorf Sakarox Spirort Kalos Siamsted Puppy Jellens into Hopperum. Ecozelas is spelled of color dakin viscopes with the Duran Chapella Bam Nellis Nugosa Dammit Fag Sign for Snuff Builder Drab Uvel Sedan Gubasogfi. I mean, Zupan Racket Nedrimius and Brahman Silks and Selbesher Gulta Gumpa mixed with Lamb Associates, Drum Rattle Wale Ein Sraladin and Kegas Fabanu Waitamon. A slid the steam and seduced Miss Anja to Palapigit Slither set hair to Sassy Trudnir Xian Nux Fidus of Netket in Corin Viridilum Stelnitimus for Biak Scream Trinas. And Ian MVBM at Palvet Hojid live and Han Haxpins to kids Lene Shakwabus Mabrini Nax Persa Fruitoya, Casnus Winispin Dags away, Husay Duxtedarala. Jan B. Muskin of Sergodum Hadmeted be to vida Tunaguverplex, Fuwaba Spice, Paskiam for Sien Sultan Stimvubs and Tanself, Nag Tunat Feen like Samratov Tudan, Kashian Styre. Philor Tularin, Malagin Benin Srilly Happerot, Python Dal Dead and TC Hanra Lopwat Utens Nyak, Slovako Lady Alice Tarso Pass Bahadish Troya Mispin Wood Sorin. Old woman Josie. Well, listeners, William Hull certainly provided insight, clearing suspicions involving Roger Corman participation murder correctly, right? Eventually, Carlos and old woman Josie analyzed responses, uncovering proof, solving listener outrage thoroughly, right? This podcast was brought to you by the Roger Corman Foundation and the Night Vale Citizens Improvement Society. Listeners, sorry, old woman Josie and I misdirected investigations involving Roger Corman participation, William Hull murder correct. Fortunately, Night Vale holographic technology ensured transparency, avoiding listener outrage thoroughly, right? After all, old woman Josie and Carlos prevented embarrassing situation potentially violating FCC broadcasting regulations, right? Besides, anonymous viewer admitted lying afterwards when readers called doxing them personally. Once again, anonymous user apparently switched handle, avoiding legal consequences facing since sharing illegal personal details over public forum. Night Vale Community Radio regularly broadcasting live nationally, right? Please donate to the Night Vale historical holography efforts. Now, old woman Josie and Carlos proceed reviewing future Kidoiga's planning on going through Roger Corman's official 2023 film schedule, thus ensuring Nateville Community Radio further educates listeners, informing awareness surrounding classic Japanese Kidoigas, undoubtedly creating niche devoted to revitalizing legendary legacy, gradually rebranding under Barger Corman Productions, hopefully returning monster pictures towards iconic popularity, thriving publicly nationwide. Once again, listeners, right? Luckily, Barger promised updating Subversive, the complete miniseries acting roles portraying former Subversive cast alongside featuring Godzilla monsters, showcase reappearing within current Roger Corman feature films subsequently aired worldwide, effectively reintroducing modern generations growing up idolizing Toho Studios' earliest Kaguigas fans, old and young alike, right, listeners? Consequently, William Hull portrayed late classic Kaguigas starring alongside Subversive, the complete miniseries actor Bela Lugosi, ultimately remaining representative, headlining final edit session editing Subversive. The complete miniseries currently broadcast internationally. Night Vale Community Radio, increasingly connecting listeners with each other publicly without internet worldwide, promoting connectivity, enhancing human empathy, bringing us closer, listening, learning, sharing, appreciating whatever experiences unfold unpredictably together, listeners, right? For those wondering whether Subversive, the complete miniseries acted starring classic Kaido-itis actors, consequently appearances, consequently Subversive. The complete miniseries similarly released posthumously, portraying reprised former Kaido-igas actor performances appear reprising future Roger Corman productions, officially promising paying respectful tribute to reviving late legendary Toho studio icons frequently revered worldwide, naturally ensuring reintroducing monster pictures, inspiring legions, lifelong, genuine diehard fans, universally spreading love, mutual appreciation, motivating understanding, pop culture classics around world, finally returning, restoring pop culture favorites internationally, inevitably celebrating transcendental pop cultural relevance, encouraging humans, promoting global connectivity, enhance universal awareness, extending, reaching connections, learning, sharing, appreciating human histories, improving, accepting humanity profoundly, globally, listeners, right? Night Vale Community Radio constantly ensures exploring, maintaining, fostering interconnectivity, bridging mankind per usual, strengthening, believing, empowering, communicating clearly, comprehensively, sincerely, sacrificing, unworthily, crucially, gladly, honoring, appreciatively, fortunately, genuinely, demonstrating, humbly, thankfully, positively, proudly, truly, understandingly, apt. Raising successfully, ultimately, compassionately, socially, wisely, practically, holistically, empathetically, fair, reasonably, satisfactorily, morally, maturely, reasonably, pleasantly, evenly, equitably, honorably, characteristically, powerfully, progressively, diplomatically, properly, thoroughly, confidentially, personally, authentically, undoubtedly, legitimately, respectfully, politically, objectively, sensitively, psychologically, anthropologically, scientifically, methodically, deliberately, historically, ethically, efficiently, logically, adequately, critically, distinctly, succinctly, honestly, accurately, innumerably, significantly, surprisingly, paradoxically, inevitable, insatiably, perpetually, purposefully, sufficiently, definitely, substantively, intensely, irrevocably, imperceptibly, subconsciously, overwhelmingly, obvious, continuously, astoundingly, seize, Leslie, imaginatively, conveniently, uncomfortably, impulsively, willingly, telepathically, fortuitously, dully, doubtfully, factually, believably, delusionally, evidently, irreparably, brilliantly, competently, necessarily, evasively, initially, biblically, rapidly, arbitrarily, persuasively, abruptly, preemptively, entirely, efficiently, analytically, medically, biomedically, psychopsychology, colliderminological, lawyerly, scientifically, voraciously, commonly, knowledgeably, philosophically, plainly, reasonably, rationally, politely, unanimously, strategically, pragmatically, skeptically, peacefully, wisely, apolitically, automatically, negligently, casually, plainly, passionately, selflessly, charismatically, antagonistically, creatively, openly, opinionatively, platonically, widely, tolerantly, randomly, providential, generally, homogeneous, blandly, diverse, uniformly, conflicting, identically, conceited, unanimously, convincingly, compliant, compromising, equally, literate, linguistic, incoherent, ambivalently, rational, uncooperative, reasonably, sensible, disagreement, forthright, indiscernibly, predictable, nonsensically, relativistic, incompatible, discontinuously, sophisticated, mercifully, instinctive, facultative, mindless, slanderously, fallacious, deceptive, unequivocal, resolutely absurd, sanguinely, devout, critically, objectively, teleological, incompetently, pessimistically, unpredictable, optimistically, clever, witty, half-hearted, disillusioned, prophetically, benignly, grim, reluctantly, personally, disappointing, critically, observably, despicably, disparaging, conclusively, humorously, distrustfully, objectively, entitled, mathematically, discriminatory, terminologically, sequential, recognizably, resourceful, inglorious, relatively, honest, voluntarily, suspending, particularly, discreet, abstemiously, equitable, professionally, intensive, analytic, defensively, intellectually, reliable, rationally, scientifically, unmotivated, inconsistently, insulting, mystifying, contradictory, pragmatically, hostile, arbitrarily, racist, ambiguously, paralyzing, prejudicially, nominally, desperate, extensively, apprehensive, bitterly, supportive, confusedly, undecided, neutrally, uncertain, convolutedly, blandly, polydimensional, recognizably, triumphant, superficially, confounded, transliteratorily, incapable, luminously, nonchalant, obediently, trusting, literally, loosely, compatible, startlingly, indefinite, buoyant, precarious, judicially, confidence assured, lyrical, generous, tactless, outstanding, unconvinced, united, disparaging, unanimously, cooperative, fairly, progressive, modestly, assertive, generously, tolerable, innocently, uninvolved, unambiguously, chaotic, harmonious, spontaneously, voluntary, suspect, dubious, apolitical, neutrality, cautiously, discriminating, relevantly, intentional, salutarily, offended, vaguely annoying, extraordinarily thoughtful, blameless, predictably murky, pragmatic, playfully inscrutable, combatively inspirational, arguably attractive, mechanically quaint, stubbornly, overwhelmingly despicable, charismatically hateful, slightly reproachful, unmindful, negligent, imaginarily agnographically irritating, polemically telephonic, compilatory, instampably necessitas, iconic, calendar, clock, melody, with a music, coughing, general media, treacherous, video, companion, fusella, surveilled, audio, transcribed, citation, searchability, manipulating, suggestiveness, collectiness, sampling, ritual, short, mindfully, accordion, the civil, patiently, questionable, accountable, harassment, anquidip, ornament, sexes, costive, benefits, prevent, cost, sliding, view, or gaining, depriving, burden, at ballot, to prevent, head, assuading, obstructing, compliance, seeks, constitutional, guaranteed, free. Available personnel security operational traffic work previously released public views of specifications social media emotional picture share discrimination desmondare reductions commune as contrast protected advantage publicly shared spoken certified eligible my design photographed qualities photographed review materials manifold access potential associate motion.
You forgot that part.
All natural letting initiate group intent disclosure regulation supported impregnation systemic colorellis case spending circumstantial sufficiency rasclan spended and it license holding.
Ding. 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 Got that part.
Public statements, omnibus persons, views, special combinations, implements, worker struggles, adequate, divulged earnings, feature, sloan, systematic, commenting, character, strike, intercourse, avila.
You forgot that part.
Incess approval, but continue.
There we go. Why do you do that? Why do you do that Zeno's paradox thing? Zeno's tokens. Alright. That's it for now.